They said they wanted me there. They swore it wouldn't be the same without me. Fly away, Grandpa, they said. We want you here for Thanksgiving. So that's what I did. I packed my special set of carving knives. I packed my favorite worn-out sweater. I took my last drop of serenity with me. Then I waited. I stood at Gate 3A at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, under the arrival sign, my wheeled suitcase at my side, my jacket neatly folded over my arm. People hurried by with flowers, balloons, little children holding signs. Some were hugging, some were crying. All were being embraced. I was like a misplaced package. The flight had landed 42 minutes earlier. I had double-checked and triple-read the message from the daughter-in-law. We'll be there. The kids can't wait to see you. And then the heart emoji. I sent a reply. Flight lands at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone. There was no reply. I kept my jacket folded because it was hot inside. I didn't sit down because the moment I sat down, I felt like giving up. Like I was giving up. I didn't want to look like a forgotten man. At some point, my phone rang. It was not a call, not even a message, but a social media notification. My heart sped up, not because I cared about these things, but because that's where my family sometimes posted photos before calling me. I opened the app and there they all were. My son Greg in the navy blue sweater I sent him last year. His wife Melanie, as wide and tanned as ever. The children, Elliot and Ruby, gathered around a table filled with candles, turkey, mashed potatoes. A pie I didn't bake. They were all toasting. Explanation: full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours. My eyes skimmed the frame one more time. There was no mistake. There was no place for me at that table. I didn't cry, Ma. Not then. I just turned around, put on my jacket, and started walking out of the terminal, past the taxis, past the shuttle signs. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to wait for them to remember me. Greg called 3 days before my flight. That alone should have warned me. My son doesn't usually call, unless it's a birthday or a bill or some other reason. But this time his voice was sweet as honey, overly cheerful. Hi, Dad. Any plans for Thanksgiving? I told him I was thinking of staying in, roasting a small chicken, maybe baking a pie if my hands would let me, watching an old movie. Nothing fancy, I said, just me and the radio. He paused for a moment, as if calculating something. Well, he said, the kids have been asking about you. Maybe you'd like to come here this year. Everyone will be together. It wouldn't be right without you. That part, it wouldn't be right without you. It did something inside me. I haven't felt so truly wanted anywhere in a long time. Needed, yes. Called trusted, but not wanted. There is a difference, so I said yes. I told him I'd find a flight. Greg didn't offer to book tickets or cover my expenses, and I didn't ask. I still had the envelope of Christmas money I had set aside for emergencies. I thought that was enough. After I hung up, I stared at the phone for a while. My fingers still curled. I tried to remember the last time I was excited, not worried or anxious or obligated, just really excited. It had been years since the last time someone had invited me without demanding anything from me. That evening, I bought the ticket, found a discounted nonstop flight. I even paid an extra $12 to choose a seat with more legroom. Maybe it was ridiculous, but I figured if you're going halfway across the country, you might as well do it with some comfort. The next day I went shopping, and not just for gifts. I bought 2 books for the kids and a box of dark chocolate truffles that Melanie used to love. No, I bought something for myself too. A new sweater, navy blue, soft wool, the kind that fits well on the hips and makes you feel like maybe you're in the picture. I packed 3 days in advance, checked the weather in Minneapolis, set my heat to low, took out the trash early. I didn't tell my bridge group I was leaving. They just asked too many questions. And maybe part of me didn't want to ruin my chances. It had been a long time since someone said to me, "Come, we want you here." The airport was crowded, full of people with wheeled bags, headphones, animal-shaped pillows. I smiled at a baby in the opposite aisle, locked eyes with another old woman reading a book. Both of us with our hands in our laps, both of us with untold stories. When the plane landed, I straightened my pants and brushed the crumbs from my lap. I put on my good shoes, black ones with small heels. I wanted to look like the kind of man who was invited, and I believed I was, until I wasn't. The walk from baggage claim to the exit took longer than usual. Maybe it was the weight of the suitcase. Maybe it was the weight of something else. I carried my suitcase past the coffee kiosks, past the reunited families, past the young woman crying joyfully on her boyfriend's shoulder. I didn't feel pain then, only displacement, as if someone had paused me and the world kept moving. Outside, the sky was gray with that dull Midwestern light that made even the air feel heavy. My phone was still silent. No messages, no missed calls. I checked the time again. 15:54. Thanksgiving dinner probably wouldn't start until 1700 or 1800. Maybe they were busy. Maybe the kids were misbehaving, or the turkey needed to be roasted. There were dozens of reasons, all harmless. But even harmless reasons hurt when you stand alone on arrivals. I waited on the sidewalk for another 20 minutes until my knees started to rebel. I sat on a bench. I watched strangers get into cars that knew their names. I watched a woman in a puffy jacket bring hot chocolate and hugs to her mother-in-law. The mother-in-law looked older than me. That hug, short, tight, real, sat right in the hollow of my chest. At one point, I tried calling. Greg didn't pick up. I left a message. I told him I'd landed. I told him I was at the usual pickup point with the airplane sign outside Gate B. I told him everything was fine and I'd wait a little longer. But I already knew. I knew before I opened the app again, before the photo loaded, before I saw the cranberry sauce and the long wooden table and the header full of hearts. It wasn't the first time I'd been forgotten, but it was the first time I admitted to myself what it was. I stood up, shook off my jacket, and pulled my suitcase behind me. No taxi, no Uber, just me and the sidewalk. A man pushing a stroller offered a tired smile. I nodded. It's funny, in or out of airports, sometimes you can feel that you are seen more by strangers than by your own blood. It was almost 17. The air had gotten sharper, the kind of chill that crept under the collar and asked, "What now?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. My shoes weren't suited for this much pavement, but I didn't stop. About half a mile out, just beyond a car rental return, I saw her. A squat building with a neon sign that read Tina's Diner. The light flickered. The windows were fogged with the steam from inside. Someone had taped paper turkeys to the glass. I went inside. The bell above the door rang. Inside, the diner smelled of hot oil and cinnamon. Vinyl booths, yellowed menus, a counter with cracked stools. There were maybe 6 people inside. A man in a UPS jacket, an older couple eating quietly, a waitress in a short ponytail who looked up as I walked in and said, "Happy Thanksgiving, dear." "You too," I said, surprised at the calmness of my own voice. I chose a booth by the window, slid in. The seat was warm, the table clean. "The kitchen is slow today," the waiter said as he handed me the menu. "But we have turkey and pie." "Pie would be good," I said. "Which one?" He grinned. "Pumpkin, pecan, or key lime?" "Pumpkin and some coffee, please." "Coming right up." I looked out the window as I waited, my suitcase next to me, like an obedient little dog. My phone, face down on the table, vibrated once. I did not. The pie arrived. It was warm with a dollop of whipped cream on top, slightly tilted to one side. The coffee was strong and slightly bitter, just the way I like it. I took a bite, then another. It was the best piece of pie I've had in years. Maybe not because of the spices or the crust. Maybe it was because I'd never once made it for someone else. I ate slowly. I took my time. I didn't rush. I didn't scroll. I didn't wait for anyone to show up and say it was all a misunderstanding. They weren't coming. Not today. Maybe never. And I was still there, whole, breathing, sitting in a booth under the paper turkeys, waiting for the warmth to return to my fingers. "Would you like another slice with that?" the waiter asked when he brought the check. I thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, for later." He winked. "Best decision you'll make today." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because he was right. When I stepped outside again, the air bit me more sharply. The small white bag with my second slice of pie dangled in one hand, my suitcase rolling behind me with a soft plastic rustle. I had no plan. There was no hotel booked, no one waiting for me, but somehow I didn't feel lost. Not really. There is a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop waiting for the people who hurt you to fix it. The wind picked up as I walked. It wasn't far to the nearest affordable motel. I had seen the sign as I walked from the airport. Valley Inn, weekly rates available. Nothing flashy, a low, square building, painted beige, with a vending machine at the front door. But the lights were on, and for the moment, that was enough. Inside the lobby, behind the counter, a man was watching a soccer match on a small TV. He looked up as I walked in, his face smelling of boredom and frying oil. "You need a room?" "Yes, just for one night," I said. "Single." I looked down at myself. My good shoes were scratched from walking. My sweater smelled faintly of airplanes. I nodded. "Single." He handed me a form over the counter. ID and card. I handed them over. As he wrote, I looked at the TV. A red and gold team was losing badly. The man didn't seem to care. Room 114, he said, handing me a key on a thin key ring. End of the line. I took it, thanked him, and dragged my suitcase down the sidewalk. The room was exactly what I expected. 2 lamps with mismatched lampshades, a bedspread with a faded brown pattern, a TV older than my children, but it was warm. It had a working heater and a surprisingly clean bathroom. I took off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, my feet aching. My back ached even more. But my heart, the part that should have shattered, was strangely intact. I stared at the phone for a long time, then dialed again. 3 missed calls from Greg, 2 from Melanie, a single message. Dad, where are you? No apology, no explanation, just confusion, as if I had disappeared, as if I was the one who forgot to show up. I didn't answer. Instead, I unpacked my suitcase, took out the notebook I use for my grocery lists and thoughts I never say out loud, and wrote something on a new page. I'm not a spare, I'm not an extra, I'm not a garnish on someone else's table. I stared at the sentence for a long time, then underlined it. A year ago, I might have cried. 5 years ago, I would have cried. But tonight, the tears didn't come. Instead, a strange clarity came, like stepping into cold water. Surprising but clear, it wasn't just about this dinner or the airport. It was the years that led to this. Birthdays missed, voicemails left unanswered, last-minute invitations that always seemed like an obligation, never a joy. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago, when Melanie had called and said, "If you don't mind coming here, we'd love to have you." The hesitation in her voice, the way she said "if." I got on the bus to fix something for them. I remembered Greg's 40th birthday, when I sent him a leather wallet with his initials engraved, and he replied with a mass text, "Thanks everyone for the presents." I remembered Ruby's school play. I had found the live stream myself and watched it on my little laptop with a shot of whiskey and a lump in my throat. She didn't know I was watching. No one mentioned it. And yet, to this day, I was always seen. Perhaps standing alone on the sidewalk in another city allows one to see the shape of what is always there. I wasn't part of their life. I was an accessory, a convenience, a placeholder when they needed to remember their better selves. I looked around the motel room. Ugly, honest, functional. It was the most honest place I had been in years. I got up, made myself a cup of motel coffee with the plastic coffee maker, and sat cross-legged on the bed with my second slice of pie. There were no porcelain plates, no linen napkins, just a white paper bag and a plastic fork. And yet, it tasted like something I deserved. There was a thin crack in the ceiling of the motel room, stretching like a road map above the bed. I stared at the heater as it wheezed. Outside, I could hear the wind scratching the walls and the occasional roar of engines from the nearby highway. 2 rooms away, a man was coughing, a deep, wet, miserable cough. Somewhere a toilet flushed. It was not a peaceful night, but it was an honest one. Around 2 a.m., I finally fell asleep, the frayed blanket pulled up to my chin, my notebook still open on the nightstand. I slept in the clothes I came in, too tired to change, too tired to unpack again. In the morning, I woke up before sunrise, a habit I have never lost. Even after I retire, my body insists on being useful at 6 in the morning. I made another cup of lighter coffee from the machine in the room and watched the sky light up through the blinds. The pie was gone, the coffee too, but the silence remained. At 07:12, my phone rang. "Dad, I'm so sorry. There was a mix-up at the pickup. We thought your flight was tomorrow. Can you come home today? The kids really want to see you. Greg." There was no explanation for the photo. There was no mention of dinner. No apology for posting a Thanksgiving photo without me. Just confusion and, "Can you come?" I looked at the text, then I put the phone down. I didn't answer. Instead, I got dressed, combed my hair, put on some cologne. It wasn't about seeing them. It was about dignity, about reminding myself that I still decide how I look to the world, even if no one's looking. In the lobby, there was a bowl full of crushed apples and a coffee carafe that smelled like burnt cardboard. I took an apple and put it in my bag. I checked out. The man behind the counter barely looked up from his soccer recap. It was cold and clean outside. The wind had died down. The sky was that fragile blue that only happens in November. Sharp, high, endless. I didn't go back to the airport right away. Instead, I walked. There was something I had to do first. A mile or so down the road was a small post office annex tucked between a gas station and a closed tire shop. I walked in and asked for an envelope and a pen. "Do you sell stamps?" I asked. "Sure," said the clerk. He was young with nail polish on his fingernails. "I need a stamp for a letter to Massachusetts," I said. He handed it to me, and I wrote the address from memory. Malmaya, Wexler, 12 Pond Hollow Lane, Worcester, MA0609. My granddaughter. Anew was Greg's daughter from his first marriage. She was still the only one who called me just to chat. She was 23 now, finishing nursing school. She sent me pictures of her cat, let me know when she passed her exams, asked for my recipe for cornbread stuffing. The envelope remained empty for a moment. Then I took out a page from my notebook and started writing. Dear Emma, you once told me that I was the place you could count on. Hearing that meant more to me than most things in the world. This Thanksgiving did not go as planned. I flew across the country for a table that was never meant for me to sit at. But in the silence, I found something I didn't expect. A place to remember who I am without waiting for someone else to tell me. I kept writing, not bitter, not dramatic, just real. When I sealed the envelope, I felt lighter. I bought my ticket home at 10:35 p.m. Same airline, same gate, but a different man boarding the plane. The flight wasn't until evening, so I found a CAF-C near the terminal with big windows and nice scones. I sat there for hours with coffee and a pen, going over things that hadn't been said in a very long time. I didn't write to Greg. I didn't call Melanie. I didn't tell them where I was. They would see the missed call. Maybe they would wonder. Maybe they wouldn't. I wasn't angry. I was done. Around 4 p.m., the light changed. That golden haze, the kind that makes even parking lots look beautiful. I watched a little boy run towards a van, his backpack swinging. He turned and slowly but smilingly waved to his grandmother. His grandmother waved back, and the boy ran towards her, holding her hand as if it were his hoe. I watched until they disappeared, and I whispered to myself, not loud, not bitter, just clear. I deserved it too. The flight home was only half full, a real blessing. I had a whole row to myself. The seat by the window was cold when I sat down, and I left it that way. I hadn't yet bothered to fold my jacket or adjust the seatbelt on my lap. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to keep myself tidy for someone else's convenience. The flight attendant offered a soft smile. Are you going home or are you leaving? She asked as she placed a plastic cup of water on a tray in front of me. Both, I said, in a way. He didn't ask more, just nodded and moved on. He is that quiet, understanding kind of kindness, rare and gentle. As we took off, I looked out the window, watched the gray city below us shrink, watched the runways intertwine like faded wounds. As the plane lifted off, the sky opened wider, blue above and below, with nothing in between but the dull hum of the engines and my own breath. I thought I might feel grief again, in a wave. I waited as if expecting turbulence, but it didn't come. Nor did I feel peace, not yet. But I felt still, rooted in the present. It was new. Halfway through the flight, I took my phone out of the fan and turned it back on. I told myself I was just checking the time, but of course the notifications poured in. 4 texts from Greg, 1 voicemail. Dad, I'm really sorry. Please call me back. The kids were asking where you were. Melanie said she thought you knew we moved dinner up a day. Can we talk? I didn't open the voicemail. I didn't delete it. I let it wait. I let it wait like I waited. I hung up the phone again. It was already dark when we landed. My little city was quiet and glowing with familiarity. The shuttle driver who took me to the parking lot was an old man with a twinkle in his eye. He asked if I was visiting family and I smiled. Not exactly, I said. At home, my porch light was still on. I had left it out of habit, as if I would return tired, full, and wrapped in the warmth of family. Instead, I went inside with the pieces in my bag and a mind that hadn't been this sharp in years. My house smelled of lavender and old wood. The radiator started up with a soothing sound. I put my suitcase on the floor and hung up my jacket. I moved slowly, not out of old age, but out of intention. I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I hosted Thanksgivings for years. The same table where Greg once spilled the gravy, where Emma once cut snowflakes out of napkins, where Melanie sat with her lips tightly pursed, looking at her phone more than at my face. I looked around the room like it belonged to someone I still knew, and then I opened the drawer next to the fridge, the one with the folders, the one labeled Greg and Emma and legal. I pulled out Greg's folder. It was thick. Receipts, copies of checks, tuition assistance printouts, a bill from a mechanic I helped pay when his transmission failed, a co-signature on the mortgage in 2010, the private preschool deposit I paid in advance for Ruby, a note in Melanie's handwriting. We'll pay you back after the bonus is paid. They never did. I turned each page carefully, as if healing wounds, not with anger, not even with sadness, but with clarity. Then I reached for the thinner folder labeled Emma. Birthday cards, photos she'd sent me, a printout of her college graduation announcement, handwritten notes in sparkling ink, thanks for helping her pay for a course, a postcard from Vermont. I wish you were here. Fall is wild and wonderful. I closed both folders and leaned back. Then I reached for my notebook. And this time I didn't write my feelings. I wrote a plan. The next morning I was there before the bank doors opened. A light frost covered the stairs, making them slippery. But I climbed slowly and determinedly, wearing my oldest boots and the same navy blue sweater. The sweater didn't match my scarf, but I no longer cared about appearances. I cared about movement. A young teller with kind eyes and a nervous smile greeted me with the kind of courtesy reserved for the elderly. "Good morning, Mr. Wexler. How can we help you?" "I'd like to speak to someone about my accounts," I said. "All of them." He nodded, looked at a screen, then called to the back. A few minutes later, I was ushered into a glass-walled office with soft chairs and the faint smell of printer ink. A woman named Natalie introduced herself as my account manager. She looked like someone who did yoga for lunch and always kept almonds in her purse. "What can I do for you today, Mr. Wexler?" "I want to suspend all automatic payments, all of them, starting today." He blinked. "All of them?" "Yes." He pressed a few buttons, his eyebrows raised slightly as he looked at the screen. "You have quite a lot of recurring transfers to family, tuition payments, car insurance, plus some planned giving. Leave the charities," I said, "and stop the rest." There was a long pause. "Do you want to talk about why?" I looked at him. I really looked at him. And to his credit, his silence was not filled with false concern. "No," I said. "I've spent enough time explaining myself." He nodded. "Understood." While he worked, I sat in the silence of that office and watched the world move outside the window. A mother trying to get a small child into a car seat, an old man pushing a walker, a delivery truck idling for too long. "All right," Natalie finally said. "Everything is suspended. If you want to sign tomorrow, I'll prepare the papers for full cancellation." "I'll be there." She hesitated. "There's also a power of attorney on file. Gregory Wexler, do you still want him to have access?" I felt my pulse slowing down, not speeding up. "No," I said. "Cancel it." "Understood." He pressed the form and I signed it with steady hands. By the time I left the bank, the frost had thawed. I took my time. I stopped at the corner bakery, bought myself a fresh donut, and walked the long way home. It wasn't about punishing Greg. It really wasn't. It was about drawing a line I had never drawn before. It was about recognizing that love doesn't just grow from sacrifice. He needs light. He needs the truth. When I got home, I took the pie plate out of the sink, washed it gently, and put it back. Maybe someday I'd make another pie. Maybe I wouldn't. But I wasn't going to do it for the people who left me on the sidewalk. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Mr. Altman had managed our business for more than 30 years. He'd helped us buy the house, organize my wife's will, even helped me draft my first version in 2005. His voice was warm but cautious. "Mr. Wexler, how can I help you?" "I want to make changes to my estate," I said, "and I want to set up a trust for Emma." "Yes." He didn't ask why. He didn't have to. People like Mr. Altman have seen every version of family disappointment. We set a time for the next day. When I hung up the phone, I felt no victory, no success, just clarity. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders and my coffee cooling on the railing. A few neighbors passed by. One waved, one didn't. The street was quiet and I felt not well, not healed, but steady, as if I had finally stopped knocking on a door that would never open. The next morning, the sky was soft and low, that pale winter gray that wraps the houses like gauze. I dressed slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to rush the next steps. At 9 o'clock sharp, I was in Mr. Altman's office, a small 2-story building with green shutters and a reception area that smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. The same gold-framed photographs hung as usual. His children, his boat, his Bulldoiden in a Christmas hat. He stood up when I walked in, as polite as he was 20 years ago. "Mr. Wexler," he said, extending his hand. "Good to see you." "You too, Mr. Altman." We sat in his office, the same leather chairs, the same ticking wall clock, the same stack of forms on his desk, only now his reading glasses were thicker and his mustache was snow white from salt and pepper. "What are we changing today?" he asked gently. "My will," I said, "and I want to create a trust. Everything I own, every single cent, every single asset, I want it protected, and I want it to go to Emma. Only Emma." He didn't blink, just nodded and pulled out a notepad. "I think we're taking Gregory and Melanie out." Yeah, they've had enough of me. More than enough. He looked at it, but made no comment. I want it to be solid, I continued. No backdoors, no loopholes. Emma is the beneficiary. She gets everything after I'm gone. And until then, she can access the trust for education, housing, health, or emergencies. I'll decide what counts as an emergency. Altman smiled slightly. You've thought this through. I have. And your house, your retirement account, your CDs, everything. If you have my name, it goes to the foundation. Understood? And you want to retain full control while you're alive. Of course I do, exactly. He leaned back. Emma's a good girl. She always has been. I felt something tighten in my throat. She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a wallet. Mr. Altman ignored the pain in my voice. Then let's make sure your wishes are honored. For the next hour, we went over every item. He asked questions. I gave clear answers. No more ambiguity, no more good intentions. When we reached the end, he gathered the papers in a folder and looked at me almost admiringly. I'll have the final draft read in a few days, he said. We'll get it notarized and it will be done. Thank you, I said, really. Outside, the air had turned crisp. I walked slowly home, stopping once at the florist to buy a small poinsettia. I didn't decorate much anymore, but I wanted something bright and vibrant on the kitchen table. The moment I stepped through the door, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. Grandpa, it was Emma. Her voice was breathless, strained, warm. I got your letter. I sat down at the kitchen table. You got it? Well, I didn't know what it was. Dad and Melanie said you canceled your flight at the last minute. They made it sound like you just changed your mind. Of course they made it sound like that. I was there, I said softly. I landed. I waited. I saw the photos. Emma fell silent. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. I know, honey, it's not your fault. I should have called. I should have checked. You didn't know. You didn't make that choice. She sniffled at the other end. I missed you that day. It didn't feel right without you. For the first time since the airport, tears appeared behind my eyes, but they didn't fall. Not this time. Thank you, I said. This means more than you can imagine. A silence fell between us. Not awkward, just full. Grandpa, he finally said, can I come visit next weekend? I have some time off from classes. I'll come by train. My heart blossomed with something gentle and painful. Of course, I said, and the guest room is ready. I'll bring the chessboard, he said. Are you still playing? I haven't stopped. A few minutes later, we hung up the phone. I sat at the table, my hand still on the phone. For the first time, I didn't feel forgotten. I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. That Saturday afternoon, I was standing at the train station in my warmest jacket, watching the passengers get off the 11:37 train from Worcester. The platform smelled of diesel and old rain. I was holding a paper bag, a sandwich, and an apple. Just in case, I thought she'd forgotten to eat. And there she was. Emma stepped off the train, dressed in a baggy hoodie and jeans, her dark curls tucked under her beret, a worn canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She looked older, somehow sharper than the last time I saw her. But when he saw me, his face lit up with something pure and infallible. He came running and gave me a real hug. It was as simple as that. There were no questions, no apologies, no tension building between us, just his arms around me, tight and real. Hi, Grandpa, he whispered into my shoulder. Hi, baby, I said. You're here. We drove home in silence for a while. He watched the streets as if he were trying to memorize them again. I drove slowly, carefully, letting her look around. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, but it felt different with her beside me. At home, she left her suitcase in the guest room while I made tea. He came back with a sense of belonging, curled up in the corner of the sofa as if he had never left. The chessboard was waiting on the coffee table. We played a game. He won. Then we played another one, which I won, fair and square. Later, we sat at the kitchen table, both of us with our tea mugs. The poinsettia I had bought earlier that week was in the center, still red, still alive. I read your letter again on the train, he said, tracing the edge of his mug with his index finger. I've never seen you write like that before. I never needed to, I said. I used to think being silent was a form of grace, but lately I think it makes it easier to ignore me. Emma looked at me. I've never ignored you. I know. She hesitated. Dad doesn't know I'm here, I guessed. He called a couple nights ago, asked if I'd seen you since Thanksgiving. I didn't lie, I just said we hadn't spoken yet. That was nice. He shook his head. It wasn't kindness, it was tiredness. Tired of pretending everything was normal. This surprised me. Emma had always been careful, diplomatic, a mediator in her fractured family. For her to say it in such a calm, determined way showed that she had grown into something powerful. "You don't have to pretend here," I said. "Never." She shook her head. "Neither do you." We sat in silence, just sipping tea, and for the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need Greg or Melanie to apologize, or explain, or make up another story about what went wrong. I didn't need a text, or a voicemail, or an invitation that was too late. I had this: my house, my tea, my granddaughter. I had myself. That evening, Emma offered to make dinner. She cooked pasta with garlic and spinach, and I grated cheese while we talked about everything and nothing. Then we watched a silly movie and laughed a lot at the parts that weren't really funny. Before going to bed, he sat next to me on the couch and said, "Grandpa, I don't want to lose you. You won't. Promise." "I can't promise forever," I said. "But for now, I'm not going anywhere." He smiled, then hugged me again, this time more gently, but no less truly. After he fell asleep, I sat in the silence of the living room, the clock ticking behind me like a slow metronome. I looked at the pictures on the mantelpiece. Some faces faded, some frames were now empty, but one picture still stood tall. Emma holding me as a baby. My hair was darker then, my face softer, but the grip of my hands on her tiny body was still just as steady. I looked at him for a long time. Then I got up, turned off the light, and went to bed. Emma left on Sunday afternoon. We lingered on the porch for a while before her train arrived. I gave her a bowl of leftover pasta, a folded scarf I had knitted last winter, and a silent affection I didn't feel the need to explain. She kissed my cheek and promised to call on Tuesday. Then he left, a quick wave from the back window of the train, his breath fogging the glass. I stood there until the train shrank and disappeared. Then I went back inside. The house was quieter than usual, but not a lonely silence. It was the kind of silence that comes after something important has been said. A silence with shape and weight. I walked slowly through the rooms, collected the mugs, folded the blanket on the couch, put the chessboard back on the shelf. When I got to the kitchen, I opened the drawer again. The files were where I'd left them. Greg's folder was still thick with papers. Emma's was still light. But it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started listing everything I'd paid for in the last 15 years. Not just the money I'd been given directly, but the things I'd quietly covered. Home repairs, medical bills, legal fees, the down payment on their second car when Greg left his first wife, the groceries when Melanie was too tired to shop, school fundraisers that I was made to feel guilty about supporting with a check instead of a visit. Line by line, I wrote them down. By the time I finished, the list was over 4 pages long. It was strange. I didn't think of myself as generous, just useful, reliable, someone who helps, like mothers do. So I did. But when I looked at the numbers, it was clear. I had subsidized their lives. In return, they gave me kindness. Empty birthdays, tired smiles, a chair by the coat rack when there was no room at the main table. I wasn't angry, really. I just finished it. At 3:17 p.m., my phone rang. Greg's name on the screen. I didn't answer. A minute later, a voicemail, then a text. "Hi, Dad. I just wanted to check in. I hope everything's okay. Let me know when you're free to talk." No urgency, nothing specific, just a vague nudge, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't left me on a sidewalk in another city, cutting up a turkey and taking family photos I wasn't supposed to see. I deleted the voicemail without listening to it. I left it unread. That night, I lit a candle, not for a special occasion, just for stillness, for the silence of the house and the way the light hit the edge of the kitchen counter. I poured myself a glass of wine, one of the good bottles I had saved for a special holiday. I cleared a single place at the table, heated the remaining soup, and sat down, not scrolling, not waiting, not hoping for the phone to ring. Later, before going to bed, I opened my email, found the folder labeled travel. At the bottom was the receipt for my Thanksgiving flight. The round trip was complete. I forwarded it to myself, then added a note in the subject line: proof of departure and return. No rescue, no reunion, just me. I didn't send it to anyone. There was no need. The next morning, I called Mr. Altman again. "I was thinking," I told him, "I want to add an article to the foundation." "Sure," he said. "What do you think?" "I want Emma to be the sole trustee, but I also want to add a letter, not a legal letter, but a personal letter." "You can add a statement of intent," he said. "It doesn't change its legal validity, but it can explain your reasons." "Fine, then I will write it." That same morning, I sat down and started writing. Whoever reads this after I'm gone, if you're wondering why everything is divided this way, let me tell you frankly, this is not a punishment. This is honesty. I have spent my life quietly, consistently giving. But love without respect is not love. Existence without care is not family. I chose the only person who saw me before I disappeared. I didn't finish the letter that day. I didn't need to rush. Some things deserve to be written slowly. Tuesday passed without a call from Emma. Not because she'd forgotten, we'd agreed she had clinics that week and didn't want to be distracted. "I'll call Friday," she said. "After my shift, same time." I trusted him. That morning, someone else called. Melanie. Her name lit up my screen like a warning sign. Bright letters and bad timing. I let it ring. Then 30 seconds later, the message came through. "Hi Arthur, I hope you're doing well. Greg said you have been hard to reach lately. See you soon." There was no punctuation where there should have been. There was no warmth where there should have been. See you soon. We weren't old co-workers. We weren't neighbors who once borrowed candy. I'd been his father-in-law for almost 15 years. I'd helped him get his first real job after Ruby was born. I'd sent him care baskets when his gallbladder was removed. I'd paid for his mother's funeral flowers when budgets were tight. See you. I put the phone down without answering. That afternoon, as if on cue, another message came. This time from Greg. "Dad, Melanie tried to call. We're getting worried. Can you just let us know she's okay?" The irony of it. They had left me at an airport, but now they were worried. Not standing there with my suitcase and no one to pick me up. Not walking into a restaurant with cold fingers. Not when they posted a photo with everyone with their arms around each other, leaving no room for me. But now, when the silence returned to them, they panicked. Silence is powerful. It unsettles people who are used to your voice, your giving, your yes. I kept the phone off for the rest of the day. That evening, I rummaged through the attic, not for any dramatic reason, just to find an old cookbook Emma had once asked for, with my apple tart recipe scrawled in the margins. I hadn't been up there for years. The boxes smelled of dust and old pine, and the insulation was curled like forgotten papers. In a box labeled 1990-2005, I found the book, and underneath it letters. Some of them. Cards from Greg when he was a teenager. Drawings from Emma as a child. Thank you notes from friends and cousins who moved away long ago. A photo of my husband in his Sunday suit holding a pumpkin pie like a trophy. I sat cross-legged on the floor and let the past rest in my lap. How much of myself I had hidden away to make room for others. I thought of Greg as a little boy. How he insisted on lying on my chest because your heart is louder than the rain. How he cried if I went to work too early. How I taught him to tie his shoelaces with 2 loops instead of 1 because it made more sense to him. I once loved her so completely. Maybe I still do, but love doesn't excuse neglect. And forgiveness doesn't mean going back. Not always. And that night, when the house was dark and the world was silent, I opened the notebook and added 2 more lines to the letter for the foundation. I didn't want my last act to be polite. I wanted it to be clear. Emma, you saw me not out of obligation, not for what I gave, but because you chose to. That's what family is. Choice, respect, truth. The pen felt heavier than usual in my hand, but I wrote anyway. The next day, I went into town and went straight to the notary. It was in the back of a cargo shop, past shelves of bubble wrap and a new generation of greeting cards. The man behind the counter had gentle hands and a long, careful way of speaking. His name tag read Dev. "I want to notarize a letter," I said as I opened the pages I had written and some trust documents my lawyer had prepared. He looked at the first page, then back at me. "Big changes?" I nodded, "the ones that are long overdue." He didn't ask more, just handed me a pen and guided me through with the quiet efficiency of someone who has seen every signature, every ending and beginning pass through his workbench. After it was over, I felt lighter, not free, not yet, but clearer, as if there were fewer twists and turns on the road ahead. Then I stopped by the market, bought milk and oranges, a bunch of lilacs marked at half price, the kind of things you buy when life gets back on track, when you choose your own peace without waiting for someone else to give it to you. At home, I put the flowers in a cracked vase by the kitchen sink. The scent of lilacs slowly spread through the house, soft and sure. I took off my jacket, folded it, and hung it on the back of the chair. As I put the groceries away, my phone rang. It was Greg again. "Dad, we really need to talk. You're not answering and it's making things worse. I don't know what's going on, but we're worried. Please call me back." The message was longer than usual. There were signs of panic, but still no real apology, no mention of what had happened, no ownership, just absence. And now the discomfort of it. He wasn't sorry for forgetting me. He was sorry that I had stopped filling in the blanks. I sat down, looked at the screen, then turned it off again. That afternoon, I took out the folders once more. Greg's, Emma's, the foundation package, and locked them all in my fireproof box, shoved them back under the bed. Not because I was hiding something, but because I was done. I was done explaining. I was done asking. I was done waiting. That night I made soup, lentils, carrots, garlic. My hands still instinctively knew how to measure. I cooked for one, not for lack. I set the table, not in mourning but in ritual, in respect for myself. The soup was good. Later I sat on the porch again, wrapped in my shawl, the air just cool enough to feel that something had changed. And as the streetlights came on one by one, I remembered a memory I hadn't thought about in years. Greg was 10 years old. He came home from school with a busted lip and mud on his jeans. At recess, another boy had pushed him on the field. He didn't cry. He just stood at the sink, rinsing the blood off his hands, saying, "Well, it's okay. It's okay." I squatted down next to him and said, "You're allowed to get hurt. It doesn't make you weak." I wish someone had said that to me, because for years I had been hurt quietly, consistently, and I had let it go unchecked because I thought resilience was a virtue. But it's not. It's not always. Sometimes it's just a delay. Sometimes it's just the price of silence. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the night creep in. The flowers in the kitchen swayed gently in the breeze, a purple blur in the dark. A dog barked somewhere on the street. A car pulled into a garage. Someone laughed sharply and loudly, a voice from another life. And I sat in my own life, no questions, no waiting, just the weight of my own belonging. Finally, the whole. Friday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I was folding laundry at the kitchen table, mostly towels, still warm from the dryer. 3 slow knocks, not the mailman, not the neighbor, the kind of knock that carries hesitation behind it. I opened the door and there she was, Melanie. Her hair was too perfect, like it had been combed and sprayed in the car. She wore heels too tight for our sidewalks and a bag slung over her shoulder. Her face had that familiar, carefully crafted expression, part concern, part show. "Arthur," she said, her voice almost tender. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer at first. I just stepped aside and let him in. As he came in, he looked around as if expecting dust or neglect. The house looked the same, but something in the air had changed. I knew it, and I think he knew it too. I took her into the living room, and she didn't sit down until I did. She carefully placed her bag at her feet and folded her hands in her lap. "I know you're upset," she began, her tone already polished. "And I just want to say that this whole thing was a big misunderstanding." "Nothing?" she continued. "Greg thought his flight was on Friday, that's what he told me. We didn't realize he'd already landed." "What about the photo?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "The Thanksgiving photo. The caption says, 'Full house, all of you smiling at the table.'" She tilted her head. That was just something I shared for the holiday. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." He looked up again very quickly. "Well, yes, but I think we need to move past that now. The kids miss you. Greg keeps calling. We're all just worried. You shut us out." I let out a small breath. "No, I've stopped filling the silence just for you. This is different." His mouth tightened. "I came here because we want to make things right." I looked at her then, really looked at her, at the effort behind her makeup, the impatience in her posture, the avoidance she carried like perfume. "You didn't come to fix things," I said. "You came to see if I was still useful." He straightened up. "That's not fair." "But it's true." He looked toward the hallway as if Greg might show up and save him from this conversation. "I've given enough," I said calmly. "More than enough. And I've decided where the rest goes." This caught his attention. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm not bitter. I'm just done." "Arthur," she said, her voice firmer now, colder. "This doesn't sound like you." "I know," I said. "It looks like me now." There was a pause. He fidgeted in his seat. "Does Greg know you've changed?" "I imagine he's getting suspicious." Her face fell. "And the house, your accounts, settled?" The silence that followed was intense, a kind of reckoning. Finally, she reached for her bag and stood up. "Well," she said, her tone now sharpened, "I'm sorry you feel that way." I smiled slightly. "No, you're sorry that I stopped accepting less than I deserved." He didn't answer. He just turned and walked to the door. He hesitated on the threshold. "Greg is really worried." "He should be," I said. "Not because I disappeared, but because I didn't come back." The door closed behind him with the softest of clicks. I stood there for a long moment, my hand on the doorknob, the air still buzzing from the conversation. Then I went back to the kitchen, finished folding the towels, lit a candle, made a cup of tea. The phone rang once that evening. It was Greg again. I let it ring, not out of cruelty because the silence was finally mine. Saturday came quietly. I woke up early, not because I had to, but because my body had settled into a rhythm again. A rhythm not governed by expectations or the noise of someone else's program. The sky outside was pale and soft. A morning that didn't force or promise anything, just offered itself. I took my tea to the porch and sat under the pale quilt I had spread over the back of the wicker chair. The steam rose slowly from the mug. Somewhere in the street, a child shouted, followed by the sound of a skateboard rolling. Winter was still holding back, but not for long. I thought about Melanie's visit, not with regret, not with anger, just curiosity, like watching someone else remember a conversation that never happened. She hadn't come for peace. She had come for control. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't give it away. That was victory. Not in winning, not in being right, but in taking root. No longer showing grace to make others comfortable. That afternoon, Emma called. Her voice sounded bright through the receiver. "Hi, Grandpa. I'm on break, but I wanted to check in on you. How's your week been?" "Eventful," I said, sipping my second cup of tea. "But calm." He caught my tone. "Did something happen?" "Melanie came by." "Oh," she said. "She and Greg said they wanted to make things right." "Oh, did they?" "No." Emma exhaled through her teeth. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm not surprised, but I'm not shaken either." There was a pause at her end. Then he said quietly, "You sound different." "Do I?" "Stronger. I guess I am." We talked for a while about her patience, about an article she had written, about her cat knocking over her favorite lamp, about the everyday things that make up real lives. When we hung up, I didn't feel that familiar pain of absence. I felt connected, present, full. Later, I spent the afternoon going through the drawers in the spare room, not out of urgency, but because I felt ready to decide what was important. I found a set of sheets I hadn't used in years. Emma might like these. A pair of earrings I had once saved for Ruby's 16th birthday, before I learned that gifts from me stayed unopened in drawers or disappeared altogether. I held the earrings in my hand for a long time. Silver, simple, classic. I had bought them when Ruby was still a baby, imagining the moment when she stood in front of the mirror before the school dance and put them in her ears. But now they were like symbols of something that never belonged to me. I put them aside, not bitterly, just finally. That evening, I wrote again in my notebook. This time, not a letter, just a list. Things I no longer owe, explanations, second chances to people who wasted first chances, apologies for taking up space, a seat at a table that won't make room for me, silence. And then I wrote another list next to it. Things I still have, my name, my peace, my mind, my home, my granddaughter's voice in my ear saying stronger. I tore the page out and folded it in half. I stuck it behind the cabinet door under the sink where only I can see it, where I keep the dishwashing gloves and extra sponges. A strange place for power, but real. That night, I set the table for one again, but this time I lit 2 candles, not because anyone else was coming, but because I was all there. I sat, spooned my soup and whispered, not for the drama, not for the pain, but because it needed to be said, I am still here. And I was. I spent the first Sunday in December decorating the porch. Nothing fancy, just a simple pine wreath with a red ribbon and 2 strings of warm white lights along the banister. I didn't do it for the neighbors or for nostalgia. I did it because I wanted to make the house shine for me, for once. Inside, I put a kettle on the fire, turned on the old radio, and let the slow jazz music fill the rooms. I used to decorate for the kids, socks with their names on them, star-shaped cookies, and the old felt angel Emma made in kindergarten. But this year, no socks, no extra chairs, no waiting. This year, I lit the fireplace early and set a tea table for one, just for me. As the sun sank behind the houses on the street, the phone rang. It was Greg again. This time I answered. "Dad." His voice was thinner than I remembered. "I'm here," I said, calm, firm. There was a pause. "I thought you weren't picking up." "I know." Another pause, longer. "I've seen the documents," and he said. "Finally, from the lawyer, the trust, the changes." "I thought so." She gasped as if she had expected a different tone. I don't understand. After everything." "Exactly," I interjected. "After everything." He fell silent. "Are you talking about the money?" he finally said. "I'm talking about the pattern," I replied. "About being forgotten, the late calls, the missed birthdays, the airport, the photo. It wasn't intentional." "No," I said. "It was worse. It was convenient." And there it was, the truth, loudly, without apology. "You're punishing us," he said. But it didn't sound like an accusation, like a hope that I would deny it, that I would comfort him, that I would give up. No, I said, I am freeing myself from obligation, from old loyalties that only work in one direction, from guilt that I have carried for so long that I have forgotten what lightness feels like. I never thought it would come to this, he murmured. I know, his voice broke. We're still your family. No, Greg, I've been your family. You haven't been mine for a long time. And with that, we ended. Not with shouts, not with a resolution, just with a truth spoken so quietly that it echoed for years. I hung up the phone, stood in front of the window, and watched the street lamp flicker. The next day, I sent Emma a small package containing a silver pendant wrapped in a soft cloth, a copy of the foundation, and a note. These are yours, not because you want them, but because you showed up. Wear them when you feel unsure of yourself. You are never invisible in this house. Then, now, never. 3 days later, she called, both crying and laughing. Grandpa, she said, her voice shaking, I don't know what to say. You already said it, I said. The day you asked if you could visit, the day you came without looking for a reason. That night, I lit the fireplace and sat in its warmth. Outside, the street was quiet, covered in the first snow of the season. I watched it fall through the window, slow and clean, and I thought of all the Thanksgivings that had come before. The Thanksgivings when I cooked with pain, when I sat in silence, when I was invited afterward. And then this, the Thanksgiving I gave myself. No carving knife, no tablecloth, no second helpings, just a walk, a diner, a slice of pie, and the clearest thing I have ever tasted. Not bitterness, but freedom. And if you are reading this, if you have ever waited for someone who forgot to wait for you, listen well. You can stop now. You can light a candle for yourself. You can buy your own fucking pie. And right here, right now, you can start again. If this story moved you, share it. There is someone out there who needs to know that you are not alone. Your silence has value. Your seat is your own, and you don't need permission to keep it.